Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Councillors, there's a paper coming round for you. Time started, okay. My name's Grant Edge. I'm a landscape architect, and I was involved in the original design of the square in the 1980s as a landscape architect in the Parks and Recreation Department. With me today is Dr. Jeff Rice, who's a historian and university lecturer. And I extend apology too from Sarah Templeton, who's the chair of the Victoria Square Community Reference Group. She couldn't be here today. Just briefly, the background of the reference group. It was formed in response to significant public concern about the earlier CCDU proposal to radically change the original square design, as we all know. The purpose of the group, and this is in the invitation note to people to join to accept reference group membership, was to assess public submissions and feedback and ensure that at all stages of the process, community views are reflected in the design of the square. Our role is to be the voice of the community in the process, ensuring that decisions made are reflective of community aspirations while incorporating and acknowledging practicalities of the design process. The group to date has been engaged in part with developing and endorsing the public consultation process. There's been a high level of consensus and empathy within the group in regards to the public's own views on what should happen. So we would like Council to support the continuation of the group's involvement as a watchdog, if you like, in the development of the design process. It's disappointing that CCDU have not engaged with the reference group about this latest version of its design intent. The analysis diagrams that are included in the report have been discussed and are pretty much reflecting the original spatial design, circulation layouts that were formed as part of the original design. So it's just really there for your information. We did meet following the publication of the latest feedback document, and we welcome the inclusion of reference to the current award-winning design at the beginning of the executive summary. We welcome the deletion of earlier rather incongruous straight footpath link into the Boca Fountain. But members of the group had other concerns as well. We're due to meet to look at the Ngāi Tahu cultural aspect. However, our involvement in evaluating more detail is not guaranteed, and that's why Dr. Rice and I are here today. The report and plan that Council has been asked to endorse does not propose any design solutions. It is misleading to call it a restoration plan at this stage of the process. It is merely a plan with numbers confirming a design strategy. It would, in my opinion, be highly inappropriate for Council to endorse this plan as being anything other than a technical brief for the design team. What needs to happen next is some design development and preparation of actual concepts that show the physical reality of any changes proposed. What will the light poles look like? What materials will the paving and walls be made of, and do they maintain existing patterns? How wide will the footpaths be? Where will the seating be? How will the Ngāi Tahu referencing be incorporated, and what will that look like? All these things are design issues that are open to a high degree of interpretation and varying degrees of subtlety. There is no detail, and the devil is in the detail. So we're proposing that you consider perhaps a couple of amendments to the staff recommendations that reflect this uncertainty. And just to be helpful for your deliberations later on, I've suggested perhaps you could amend the current recommendation 3.1 along the lines, endorse the ideas, because we've got to keep moving on this project. It's not worthwhile holding it up much longer, but there's just some things that you could say. So endorse the ideas identified in the Victoria Square Restoration Plan, September 2015, as the basis for developing design solutions. And perhaps you might want to consider adding a couple of new recommendations. That, for example, the CCDU continue to involve the Victoria Square Reference Group as the community's voice in the consideration of design concepts for any changes proposed to be made to the square, and that the reference group reports back to Council that it has reached consensus for endorsement of any proposed design interventions proposed by CCDU. As a landscape architect familiar with the design process for public spaces, I am very concerned that your endorsement of the staff recommendations could very well lead to unexpected outcomes, which would be an embarrassment to the Minister and Council. Other members of the reference group are equally concerned about the situation. We're not advocating design by committee, but rather critiquing in an informed way with the community aspirations in mind. Dr. Rice.
I'm not going to make a speech. I just want to endorse what Grant has already said and to emphasise that I'm here simply as a ratepayer and a taxpayer, anxious about wastage of public money. And already a great deal of money has been spent on consultations and various processes. We're just anxious that we don't lose sight of the public's input in the design process.
I mean, despite not knowing what you were going to be raising specifically in your deputation, you'll be probably quite pleased with how much we are aligned on this matter. Pauline?
Well, thank you. Look, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, and very good deputation, thank you. Being on the reference group, have you been given any indication of the time that this project, once it begins, will take?
No, not to date in terms of programming, and that's really to some extent depends on the level of interventions they might make. There's a suggestion for asset management reasons that, for example, footpaths would need to be relayed with some sort of paving and perhaps the walls reconstructed. So you're looking at several months of construction, I would think.
I would have thought that. And do you have any concern about the number of, or any idea of the number of footpaths? It's a little bit vague in the report, and I can only glean it from the barrier-free survey here. And on every page it seems to have a recommendation to widen the path, which initially I thought it was only one path being widened, but it seems to be more. Do you have any idea how many it is? Is it all?
No, we're unclear about that too. I mean, at the moment I had a feeling that it might have been the one round the river, the asphalt footpath, and that the others would pretty much remain the same. But again, it's all a bit unclear and there's no detail.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you very much for this. With reference group or the government side of things, has there been any liaison with the events industry? And I'm not talking about the glitzy side of it, I'm talking about the nuts and bolts delivery side of it, the production side. I have some concerns about this. So has there been any liaison with yourselves and others about the deliveries?
Who's the tourist?
Yes, one of the members of the reference group is from Tourism Canterbury. Yeah. So I have had some.
I'm talking about the actual delivery, the nuts and bolts, actually packing in and packing out, because there are so many events, and I've been involved with many over the years. So my concerns are more the practical side, the delivery side, rather than the promotion side.
I think my understanding is that in the redevelopment, or there would be inclusion for things like plugs and those sort of issues that might help facilitate better events to take place.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I mean, this is an opportunity to make the square more fit for purpose,
well,
and by laying cables and having three-phase plugs for equipment for events. This would be a good idea to do. But we're just a bit anxious that in the process the detail of the square might get changed out of all recognition, and our concern is to follow the public submissions and to maintain as much as possible what's already there. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. In answer to your question, Councillor Cotter, they identified something like 52 things that were broken, but this came right down to little things like cracks and retaining walls and things like that.
I guess with one of the areas that I'm looking at on the map, it's area 20. It's got 2010 and 21 on it. It's the large lawn, and with this site plan here, with the rise in the middle, that area that's used, for the YMCA carols or candlelight, it's the biggest space, biggest green area. Technically, it's now broken into two with the hump in the middle. So I'm just looking at that and But as you say, the devil's in the detail. I'd really like to catch up with you guys and talk afterwards at some stage. Thank you.
Phil?
Thank you. Can I just ask you, was that your earlier deputation was really around the shared pathway with cycles, and your suggestion too was around how the concepts now need some design development, and particularly say if you were to continue to be involved with that, without asking you for any detail, do you see a way for an alternative space, if you like, maybe the one that has been suggested on the other side of the river for cycleways, so that in fact this conflict and the legal aspect which has been raised with us that we deal with? Have you got any suggestions about that at a high level?
I'm not sure of the legal aspect that's been talked about in terms of the definition of a cycleway. If it is under the Transport Act, a cycle is a bike is a vehicle. Then I suppose technically designating the path on the north side as a cycleway doesn't, I would have thought, prohibit people actually biking through the park.
So that's a potential solution.
I would say so. I mean, how many people have been knocked over in the park in the last 30 years? I don't know of anybody hurt in that way. Maybe they have, but you know, how is that going to change? We're not really doing anything different. Perhaps encouraging more people to get out and bike, but don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and that's much appreciated that you took the time to make that and playing around with some of your recommendations, and I think we'll get to a good place on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mark Gerard.